Take a calm breath. Get into a comfortable position and slowly relax. Now I'm letting you drift into the flow of the story. The village appeared just as the morning sun began to rise. You slowed your car as it followed the narrow country road between green hills. A light mist rested over the fields. Wildflowers covered both sides of the road. Everything looked peaceful. So peaceful that you rolled down the window just to hear the birds singing. There were no tall buildings. No traffic. No endless lines of people rushing somewhere. Only quiet roads, old stone cottages, and gardens filled with colorful flowers. This was the village you had chosen. 3 weeks ago, you had been living in a busy city. Your days were filled with meetings, crowded sidewalks, and constant noise. Every evening felt exactly like the one before. One afternoon, while looking through property listings online, you noticed something unusual. An old flower shop in a quiet village was for sale. The photographs showed a small stone building with large front windows. Flower boxes rested beneath every window. Behind the shop was a forgotten garden surrounded by an old wooden fence. The building looked old, but it also looked full of possibility. You couldn't explain why. Something about it simply felt right. A week later, you visited the village. The moment you stepped inside the flower shop, you knew your decision had already been made. The wooden floor creaked beneath your feet. Sunlight entered through the wide front windows. The air carried the faint scent of dried lavender. Someone had clearly loved this place for many years. Now it was yours. This morning was your first official day. You parked beside the shop and climbed out of the car. The village was still waking up. A bakery farther down the street had just opened. The smell of fresh bread drifted through the cool morning air. Somewhere nearby, church bells rang softly. You unlocked the front door. The little brass bell above it chimed gently as you stepped inside. For a moment, you simply stood there. The shop was empty. Wooden shelves lined the walls. Glass vases waited to be filled. Small handwritten price tags still rested on the counter. Everything was ready. It was simply waiting for someone to begin again. You opened every window. Fresh morning air flowed into the room. The curtains moved gently in the breeze. Outside, the village square slowly came to life. An elderly man walked past with his dog. A woman carried a basket filled with vegetables. 2 children laughed as they chased each other across the square. Life here seemed wonderfully unhurried. You unpacked the flowers you had brought from the nearby market. White daisies, pink peonies, yellow sunflowers, blue hydrangeas, bundles of lavender. You filled each vase carefully. Soon the shop was filled with color. The soft fragrance of fresh flowers spread through every corner. Just as you finished arranging the final bouquet, the bell above the door rang. Your first customer had arrived. She was an elderly woman wearing a straw hat decorated with tiny white flowers. She smiled warmly. "So," she said, "the flower shop has opened again." You smiled back. "It has." She slowly walked around the shop, admiring each arrangement. "It feels alive again," she whispered. After a few moments, she stopped in front of a small bouquet of lavender and white roses. "I'll take these." As you wrapped the flowers in brown paper, she looked around once more. The previous owner cared deeply for this place. You nodded. "I hope I can do the same." She smiled. "I'm sure you will." Before leaving, she placed a small coin on the counter beside the payment. You looked at it curiously. "Oh," she laughed. "That isn't money." She picked it up and handed it to you. It was an old brass token with a tiny flower engraved on one side. "The shop has always kept this." You looked at her in surprise. "For good luck." You thanked her and placed the token beside the cash register. Somehow, it felt like it belonged there. Throughout the morning, more villagers stopped by. Some bought flowers. Some simply wanted to introduce themselves. A retired teacher. The village baker. A young couple preparing for their wedding. Each conversation was simple, kind, unhurried. Around lunchtime, you stepped into the small garden behind the shop. The grass had grown a little wild. Old stone paths disappeared beneath patches of moss. Rose bushes climbed along the fence. Although the garden needed care, it was beautiful. You imagined what it could become. Perhaps a place where flowers could bloom in every season. Perhaps a quiet corner where people could sit with a cup of tea. Perhaps both. As you stood there, you noticed something moving beneath one of the wooden benches. A gray cat slowly walked into the sunlight. Its thick fur shimmered softly. The cat looked at you with calm green eyes. Neither of you moved. After a few moments, it stretched lazily before curling up beneath a patch of lavender. It seemed completely at home. You smiled. "I suppose this is your garden too." The cat closed its eyes. Apparently, it agreed. That evening, after closing the shop, you stood outside beneath the fading light. The village square had grown quiet again. Windows glowed with warm yellow light. The scent of flowers still filled the air. You looked back at the little shop. Only this morning it had been an empty building. Now it held conversations, smiles, fresh bouquets, and the beginning of something new. As the first stars appeared above the village, you realized something. You hadn't only opened a flower shop today. You had opened the door to an entirely different life. The next morning, you woke before sunrise. The village was still asleep. A soft blue light covered the hills outside your window. For a few moments, you lay quietly, listening. The world had not fully awakened yet. Only a few birds were singing. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster greeted the morning. The air drifting through your open window smelled of fresh grass and lavender. You smiled. This was becoming your favorite time of day. After making a cup of tea, you walked downstairs and unlocked the flower shop. The little brass bell above the door rang softly. Everything was exactly as you had left it the evening before. The flowers still filled the shop with gentle colors. The old brass token rested beside the cash register. Even the gray cat was waiting outside the back door. It looked at you for a moment before stretching lazily. "Good morning," you said. The cat blinked slowly. You took that as an answer. A few minutes later, there was a gentle knock on the front door. When you opened it, an elderly man stood outside with a wooden cart filled with empty flower buckets. He wore a flat cap and sturdy gardening boots. "You must be ready," he said with a smile. "For what?" "The flower market." You looked surprised. "There is a flower market." The man laughed kindly. "Every Thursday morning." You suddenly remembered. The previous owner had mentioned it briefly when showing you the shop. You had been so busy moving that you had almost forgotten. "I'm Samuel," the man said. "I grow roses just outside the village." You introduced yourself, and together you began walking toward the village square. The streets slowly filled with life. The baker was carrying fresh bread to his display. The cafe owner placed wooden chairs outside. Children walked toward the small school at the end of the street. The village greeted the morning one quiet step at a time. As you reached the square, your eyes widened. Color was everywhere. Small wooden stalls lined the square in neat rows. Each one overflowed with flowers, bright tulips, elegant lilies, sunflowers taller than children, tiny wildflowers tied into simple bouquets. The air smelled sweeter than anywhere you had ever been. People greeted one another with warm smiles. Nobody shouted. Nobody hurried. The market felt more like a gathering of old friends than a place of business. Samuel introduced you to the growers one by one. "This is Margaret. She grew lavender. And this is Oliver. His family had raised peonies for 3 generations. A cheerful young woman named Emma specialized in wildflowers gathered from nearby meadows." Every grower spoke about flowers with quiet pride. Not as products, but as living things. You spent the morning walking from stall to stall. You touched soft rose petals, smelled fresh eucalyptus leaves, learned how to choose flowers that would stay beautiful for many days. Samuel patiently answered every question. "There is always something new to learn," he said. Even after 40 years. Near the end of the market, one small stall caught your attention. Unlike the others, it displayed only a few simple flowers. White daisies, small blue cornflowers, delicate baby's breath. Behind the table sat an elderly woman knitting a scarf. She smiled when she noticed you looking. "Simple flowers last the longest in people's memories," she said. You looked at the small bouquets again. They were beautiful in their simplicity. You bought several bundles. Not because they were expensive, but because they felt honest. As the market slowly came to an end, you loaded your flowers onto a small wooden wagon Samuel had lent you. The walk back to your shop felt different. The flowers were no longer just decorations. You knew who had grown them. You knew the hands that had cared for them. When you reached your flower shop, the grey cat was waiting on the front steps. It watched curiously as you carried the flowers inside. Together, you filled fresh water into every vase. You arranged roses near the front window, lavender beside the entrance, wildflowers in small glass jars along the shelves. The shop looked brighter than ever. Just before noon, the bell above the door rang. Your first customer of the day stepped inside. A young father holding the hand of a little boy. The child looked around with wide eyes. "So many flowers," he whispered. You smiled. "Would you like to smell one?" The boy nodded eagerly. You handed him a small daisy. He closed his eyes and breathed in its gentle scent. Then he smiled the biggest smile you had seen all week. His father laughed. "I think you've made his day." You looked around your little shop. Perhaps that was what flowers did. They didn't need to be grand. Sometimes, they simply made an ordinary day a little brighter. As sunlight poured through the windows, you realized your flower shop was slowly becoming more than a business. It was becoming a place where small moments quietly bloomed. A gentle rain had fallen during the night. By morning, the village looked fresh and bright. Tiny drops of water rested on every leaf. The air smelled of wet earth and blooming flowers. You unlocked the flower shop as the church bells echoed across the square. The grey cat was already waiting on the front step. It rubbed against your leg before wandering toward the garden. You smiled. It seemed to have decided that your shop belonged to both of you. Inside, the flowers looked even more beautiful in the soft morning light. You trimmed fresh stems, changed the water in every vase, opened the windows to let in the cool breeze. It was becoming a comforting routine. Not exciting, not hurried, simply peaceful. As you were arranging a basket of white lilies, the front door opened. A young woman stepped inside. She looked familiar. After a moment, you remembered. She was one of the people you had met on your first day. The young woman preparing for her wedding. She smiled nervously. "Good morning." "Good morning," you replied. "What can I do for you?" She looked around the shop before answering. "I was hoping you could make my wedding bouquet." For a second, you were surprised. Then you smiled. "I would be honored." She introduced herself as Anna. The wedding would take place 3 days later in the little stone church at the center of the village. "It won't be a large wedding," she explained. "Just family, close friends, and everyone who somehow feels like family." You liked the way she said that. It sounded like the village itself. You invited Anna to sit by the front window while the two of you talked about flowers. She didn't want anything extravagant. "I want something simple." She paused. "Something that feels like this village." You walked slowly through the shop, looking at each flower. Cream-colored roses, white daisies, soft blue hydrangeas, fresh lavender, tiny sprigs of baby's breath. You gathered them one by one. Anna watched quietly. The only sound was the gentle snip of your scissors. You arranged every stem carefully, turning the bouquet little by little until it felt balanced, natural, peaceful. When you finally wrapped the stems with soft linen ribbon, you handed it to her. Anna held it gently. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then her eyes filled with tears. "They're happy tears," she said quickly, laughing. "It looks exactly how I imagined." You felt something warm inside your chest. It wasn't pride. It was gratitude. Gratitude that someone had trusted your hands to create something for one of the happiest days of their life. Before leaving, Anna smiled. "I hope you'll come to the wedding." You looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "Of course. You've already become part of our village." After she left, those words stayed with you. Part of our village. Only a few weeks ago, you had arrived as a stranger. Now people were inviting you into their most important moments. That afternoon, you decided to walk through the garden behind your shop. The rain had brought everything to life. New flower buds had appeared. Bees moved lazily from blossom to blossom. Butterflies drifted through the warm air. Near the old fence, you noticed a climbing rose that had begun to bloom. Its pale pink flowers opened toward the afternoon sun. You carefully tied the branches to the wooden trellis. As you worked, the gray cat jumped onto the stone path and watched you with quiet curiosity. "You supervise everything, don't you?" You laughed. The cat blinked slowly. Perhaps it did. As evening approached, the village became quieter. The bakery closed. Children returned home. The scent of dinner floated from open windows. You stood outside your flower shop with a watering can, giving each flower one last drink before sunset. The sky slowly turned shades of gold and peach. A gentle breeze carried the sound of distant laughter across the square. You looked through the shop window. Fresh bouquets waited for tomorrow. The brass token still rested beside the register. The cat was asleep beneath the lavender. Everything felt calm. Everything felt exactly where it belonged. For the first time in many years, you realized you were no longer thinking about the life you had left behind. You were too busy living the one you had found. The wedding filled the village with joy. The little stone church stood beneath a bright blue sky. Fresh flowers decorated every window. Soft music drifted across the village square. You watched as Anna walked down the small stone path, holding the bouquet you had made. It looked exactly where it belonged. Simple, elegant, full of life. As she passed by, she smiled at you. You smiled back. You didn't need any words. Seeing her happy was enough. The ceremony was small, just as she had described. Family, close friends, neighbors. On this village, those often meant the same thing. After the wedding, everyone gathered in the square. Long wooden tables were covered with homemade food. Fresh bread, cheese, fruit, warm pies. Children ran between the tables while older villagers shared stories that seemed to grow longer every year. You spent most of the afternoon talking with people you had only recently met. Yet none of them felt like strangers anymore. As the celebration slowly came to an end, you returned to your flower shop. The village had grown quiet again. The gray cat was asleep in its favorite place beneath the lavender. You unlocked the door and stepped inside. The scent of fresh flowers welcomed you home. The next morning began like many others. You watered the flowers, opened every window, placed a small chalkboard outside the shop that read, "Fresh flowers, welcome in." The sun had only just climbed above the rooftops when the bell above the door rang. You looked up. A little girl stood quietly in the entrance. She couldn't have been older than 7. She wore a yellow raincoat, even though the sky was clear. Her brown hair was tied into 2 small braids. She held a few carefully folded coins in both hands. She looked around the shop with wide eyes. For a moment, she seemed too shy to speak. You smiled gently. "Good morning." She smiled back. "Good morning." She took one small step forward. I'd like to buy a flower." You nodded. Of course. Is it for someone special? She looked down at the little coins in her hands. It's for my grandmother. You crouched slightly so you could speak at her eye level. Is today her birthday? The little girl shook her head. No. She thought for a moment. I just wanted to make her smile. The answer was so simple. So honest. It stayed with you immediately. You slowly walked through the shop together. She looked carefully at every flower. The bright sunflowers made her smile. The pink peonies seemed too large. The white lilies looked too serious. Finally, she stopped in front of a single white daisy. This one. You smiled. Why this one? She touched one of its petals very gently. It looks happy. You carefully wrapped the daisy in soft brown paper and tied it with a small white ribbon. When the girl opened her hand to pay, you noticed she didn't quite have enough coins. She looked embarrassed. I'm sorry. I can come back another day. You smiled warmly. I have an idea. You took one tiny lavender stem from a nearby vase and placed it beside the daisy. Today they're a pair. The little girl looked confused. But I still don't have enough. You shook your head. The lavender is my gift. Her face lit up with the brightest smile. Really? Really? She carefully held the little bouquet against her chest. Thank you. Then she hurried out the door, almost skipping across the village square. You watched through the window as she disappeared around the corner. A few minutes later, an elderly woman slowly walked past your shop carrying the little bouquet. The little girl held her hand. The grandmother looked down at the flowers and smiled with quiet surprise. Even from a distance, you could see the happiness on both of their faces. You smiled too. Sometimes the smallest bouquet carried the greatest meaning. That afternoon, you wrote something in a small notebook you had begun keeping beneath the counter. Not a list of sales. Not a record of expenses. Just memories. Your first customer. The village wedding. The flower market. The little girl and her daisy. You closed the notebook and looked around your shop. Flowers would bloom, then fade. Seasons would change. But moments like these had a way of staying. Long after the petals were gone, the days passed gently. Morning after morning, you opened the flower shop just as the first rays of sunlight touched the village. The routine had become familiar. Water the flowers. Open the windows. Sweep the front step. Place the chalkboard outside. The grey cat always appeared just as you finished. They were observations about flowers. The roses bloom earlier after gentle winters. Lavender grows happiest in the morning sun. Every garden teaches patience. You smiled as you read. The final sentence caught your attention. Flowers cannot be hurried. Neither can people. You quietly repeated the words to yourself. Somehow, they felt true. You carefully placed the notebook back where you had found it. It felt like part of the greenhouse. Part of its story. Before leaving, you opened one of the greenhouse windows. Fresh air drifted inside for the first time in many years. The curtains of ivy moved gently in the breeze. Outside, birds sang from the nearby trees. The forgotten greenhouse seemed to breathe again. Over the next few days, you returned whenever you had free time. You swept away old leaves. Washed the dusty windows. Straightened the wooden shelves. The grey cat followed you every afternoon. It explored every corner before choosing a sunny spot near the door. One evening, Samuel stopped by the shop with a basket of fresh roses. When he noticed the greenhouse, he smiled. I wondered when you'd find it. You knew it was here. He nodded. Years ago, this greenhouse supplied flowers for the entire village. You looked around in surprise. Really? The previous owner grew almost everything here. Samuel gently touched one of the old wooden shelves. It was the heart of this garden. You looked through the clean glass toward the evening sky. For the first time, you could clearly imagine the greenhouse filled with life again. Rows of colorful flowers. Fresh herbs. butterflies drifting through the open windows. Perhaps one day, it would become exactly that. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the hills, golden light filled the greenhouse. The old glass reflected the colors of the sunset. The flowers outside swayed gently in the evening breeze. You stood quietly in the middle of the room. Only a few weeks ago, this had been a forgotten building hidden behind vines. Now it felt full of possibility. Much like your own life. You smiled to yourself. Some things didn't need to be replaced. They simply needed someone willing to help them bloom again. Summer arrived quietly, almost without anyone noticing. The mornings became warmer. The evenings lasted a little longer. Every garden in the village seemed to bloom at the same time. The greenhouse behind your flower shop had changed as well. Its windows were clean now. The wooden shelves stood straight again. Several clay pots already held young lavender, rosemary, and tiny rose cuttings. Each morning, after opening the shop, you spent a few peaceful minutes inside the greenhouse. It had become your favorite place. The sunlight always felt softer there. One bright morning, while you were watering the young plants, someone knocked gently on the greenhouse door. It was Samuel. He carried a basket filled with sunflowers. "They're for the summer festival," he said. You looked up. "The festival?" Samuel smiled. "You haven't experienced one yet." He sat on the old wooden bench and looked toward the village. "This weekend, everyone comes together. There will be music, food, games for the children, and flowers everywhere." You laughed. "I suppose that's where I come in." Samuel nodded. "The whole village is counting on you." For the first time since moving here, you felt a little nervous. The entire village. That afternoon, several people visited your shop. The baker wanted bright yellow flowers for his outdoor tables. The cafe owner asked for small bouquets to place on every window. The school teacher requested colorful flowers for the children's art display. Even the mayor stopped by. He smiled warmly. "We're very happy you're here. The square hasn't looked this colorful in years." You spent the next 2 days working happily. You created bouquet after bouquet. Some were large. Some were no bigger than your hand. Each one felt different. Each one had its own little story. The gray cat watched everything from the front window. Occasionally it wandered into the greenhouse for an afternoon nap. On the morning of the festival, the village hardly looked familiar. Colorful ribbons stretched across the square. Small lanterns hung between the trees. Long wooden tables filled the streets. Music drifted through the air as local musicians tuned their instruments. Children laughed before the festival had even begun. You carried the final baskets of flowers into the square. Villagers waved as you passed. "Good morning. Beautiful flowers. You've been busy." Their smiles made the work feel lighter. Near the church, you helped decorate a small wooden stage with climbing roses and white daisies. When you stepped back to admire it, Anna approached. She was holding hands with her husband. "The flowers are beautiful," she said. "They make the whole village feel alive." You smiled. The village was already beautiful. "I'm only helping people notice." Anna laughed softly. "I think you've noticed this village better than any of us." As the afternoon continued, music filled every corner of the square. Children painted flower pots. Families shared homemade pies. Older couples danced slowly beneath strings of lanterns. Nobody seemed to be watching the time. Nobody wanted the day to end. Late in the afternoon, you noticed the little girl from the flower shop. She was carrying another white daisy. When she saw you, she ran over. "This one grew in our garden," she said proudly. "I wanted you to have it." You accepted the flower carefully. "Thank you. I'll keep it here." You placed the daisy in a small glass bottle on your flower shop counter. It became your favorite flower in the shop. Not because it was rare, but because it had been given with kindness. As evening approached, hundreds of tiny lanterns began glowing above the village. Warm golden lights reflected in the flower petals. Soft laughter floated through the cool summer air. You sat quietly on a wooden bench at the edge of the square. The grey cat climbed onto the bench beside you without making a sound. For several minutes, neither of you moved. You simply watched. The children laughing. The musicians playing. Neighbors talking. Flowers swaying gently in the evening breeze. It was then that you understood something. When you first arrived, you thought you had come here to take care of a flower shop. But little by little, the village had been taking care of you, too. After the festival, the village slowly returned to its usual calm rhythm. The lanterns were taken down. The music faded into memory. But something in the air had changed. People still smiled a little longer when they passed your flower shop. The grey cat still followed you everywhere, as if it had taken responsibility for your presence in the village. And the greenhouse felt more alive than ever. Each morning, you noticed small changes. New leaves. Stronger stems. Tiny rosebuds beginning to form where there had only been green before. One late summer morning, Samuel arrived earlier than usual. He didn't bring flowers this time. Instead, he brought tools. A shovel. A pair of gloves. And a folded piece of paper. "We should plant the rose garden," he said simply. You looked at him, confused for a moment. "The land behind the greenhouse," he continued. "It used to be a full rose garden. Before it was forgotten." You turned toward the overgrown area beyond the greenhouse. You had seen it before. Tall grass. Wild bushes. Broken stone borders hidden under weeds. It had always felt like part of the background. Not something waiting to become anything again. Before autumn, Samuel added. "It's the best time." So that afternoon, you began. At first, it didn't feel like much. Just clearing weeds. Loosening soil. Moving stones that had been buried for years. But slowly, the space began to change. Not quickly. Not dramatically. But quietly. Like most things in this village. The grey cat supervised from a safe distance. Occasionally walking across the soil as if inspecting your work. "You're not very helpful," you told it once. It blinked slowly. As if disagreement was beneath it. By the second day, more villagers joined. The baker came with baskets of compost. The teacher brought wooden markers for planting rows. Even the little girl arrived holding a small watering can almost bigger than herself. "I want to help the roses grow," she said proudly. You gave her a small patch of soil. "Then this is your part." She treated it like something extremely important. And in a way, it was. Day by day, the garden began to take shape. Soft curves replaced wild chaos. Neat rows formed where nothing had been before. And finally, the first rose bushes were planted. Some pale pink. Some deep red. Some white, almost glowing in the afternoon light. Each one carefully placed. Each one given space to grow. On the third evening, Anna visited the greenhouse. She stood quietly at the edge of the new garden. "It already feels different," she said. You nodded. "It's still empty. But not forgotten anymore." Anna smiled softly. "That's how everything important begins." A few days later, the first rain came, not a storm. Just a gentle autumn rain that arrived without warning. You stood inside the greenhouse and watched it fall. Drops slid down the glass. The newly planted roses swayed slightly in the wind. The soil darkened. And the village smelled like fresh beginnings again. The grey cat sat at the doorway, watching the rain like it understood something you didn't. You leaned against the wooden frame. For the first time in a while, you didn't feel like you were building something new. It felt more like uncovering something that had always been there. Waiting. Not for perfection. But for attention. That night, you wrote in your notebook again. Not about flowers this time. About time. About patience. About how some things only grow when you stop trying to rush them. Outside, The rain continued softly over the village. And inside the greenhouse, the future of the rose garden quietly began. Autumn passed slowly. The rose garden grew stronger with every week. The greenhouse was now filled with life. Young plants covered the wooden shelves. Fresh herbs filled the air with their gentle fragrance. The flower shop had never looked more welcoming. The villagers often stopped by even when they didn't need flowers. Sometimes they came for a short conversation. Sometimes they simply enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere. You no longer wondered whether you belonged here. The answer had quietly found you. One morning, you woke to an unusual silence. No birds were singing. No breeze touched the windows. The village seemed to be holding its breath. You walked to the bedroom window and gently pulled back the curtain. Everything outside had turned white. The first snow had arrived. The rooftops wore soft blankets of snow. The trees sparkled beneath the pale morning light. Every garden looked peaceful beneath its white cover. Even the road had disappeared beneath the fresh snow. You stood there for several moments, smiling. The village looked completely different. Yet somehow, it still felt exactly the same. Warm. Gentle. Home. After putting on your coat and scarf, you stepped outside. The snow crunched softly beneath your boots. Your footprints became the first ones on the path leading to the flower shop. When you unlocked the front door, the familiar brass bell greeted you once again. Inside, the shop felt wonderfully cozy. The fireplace quietly warmed the room. Steam rose from the cup of tea you placed beside the counter. Outside, snow continued to fall in slow, silent flakes. The grey cat arrived a few minutes later. Its thick fur was sprinkled with tiny snowflakes. It shook itself before walking confidently inside. You've decided winter belongs to you as well. The cat curled up beside the fireplace without answering. You laughed softly. Some things never changed. As the morning continued, the first customers began arriving. An elderly couple bought white roses to celebrate their anniversary. The baker brought you a loaf of warm bread, still fresh from the oven. "I thought you shouldn't spend the first snowy day without proper bread," he said. You thanked him with a smile. Later, the little girl appeared again. This time, she wore a bright red scarf wrapped almost to her nose. She carefully held a small paper bag. "I baked cookies," she announced proudly. "My grandmother helped." She placed the bag on your counter. "They're for you." You opened it carefully. Inside were several small butter cookies shaped like flowers. "They're beautiful." She smiled. "I tried to make roses. They're perfect." Before leaving, she looked out the window. "The snow makes the village look like a story." You followed her gaze. "I think it always was." The afternoon grew quieter. Snow continued to cover the rooftops. The village square became peaceful once again. You decided to visit the greenhouse before closing. When you opened the door, warmth still lingered inside. The young roses rested peacefully. The herbs remained green despite the winter outside. Life hadn't stopped. It had simply become quieter. You stood in the middle of the greenhouse. Looking through the glass roof, you watched snowflakes drift gently from the sky. One landed softly against the window before slowly melting away. You remembered the first day you had found this forgotten place. Dust. Broken glass. Silence. Now there was warmth. Growth. Hope. As evening arrived, you lit a small lantern outside the flower shop. Its golden light reflected across the snowy street. One by one, lights appeared in every cottage around the square. The village glowed beneath the winter sky. Before locking the door, you looked around your little shop one last time. The flowers. The wooden shelves. The notebook beneath the counter. The old brass token. The daisy in the little glass bottle. Every corner held a memory now. You smiled as you turned the sign to closed. When you first came to this village, you believed you had been searching for a quieter life. But standing there, beneath the softly falling snow, you finally understood the truth. You hadn't been searching for a place. You had been searching for a feeling. And somehow, among the flowers, the seasons, the greenhouse, the kind neighbors, and one quiet grey cat, you had finally found it.